Are the cameras ready to roll and all that? Ready to go. Okay. In America, we have some serious problems, not only in the socialization of medicine, but in the national socialization of our country. We're losing our freedoms, our liberties, our rights. They're going to try to eventually destroy the Constitution. They ignore it right now. One of the avenues of freeing yourself again is reclaiming your sovereignty as a citizen. My understanding is that the citizen, we the people, are sovereign over the state, and the state is sovereign over the government, and the government is an agent of the states collectively. We have a dentist who has implemented his own personal liberty by becoming knowledgeable about what constitutes sovereignty as a citizen. And he's sold his practice, and he's gone out and started to teach this in a meaningful way. And that, of course, is Dr. Jack Alpan. He's got a curriculum vitae here that reads like a rap sheet, and I can just give you some highlights just to let you know where he's coming from. He started out as a dental lab technician in 1960, went to USC School of Dentistry. He'd taken numerous courses in various things from hypnosis. He was in the Marine Corps in Vietnam. He was discharged, went into private practice. He studied, Columbus was what movement? Freedom? Free enterprise system, right. And then he got married, and he studied nutrition with Raskin and Bob Barkley and Al Huggins and Melvin Page, Price Pottinger Foundation. You're in ICANN too, weren't you? And then studied with John Ott and L. Ron Hubbard, Arnold Pike. Brings us up to about 1977. He built a new office. He took a number of celebrities as patients in Los Angeles. He took EAV with Peter Medill, who wrote a tremendous essay about dentistry and the holistic physician, which has appeared with his permission in our focus journals, but it was also in the Journal of Acupuncture. It goes on down here, 1986. 1986 to okay. In 1991, he sold his practice, and he became a sovereign free dentist. He's practicing dentistry without a license, 1 day a week. There are several other dentists that I've talked to that are using this avenue, and rightfully so. We are kept ignorant. We are lied to by our government. Our government has committed fraud on every single one of us, and people should be indignant. They should be in the streets. Linda Thompson, the woman that had some of the original footage in the Waco disaster, heads up a group that might be a little radical. She wanted to go out there and arrest Congress people that have violated the Constitution. But it's coming to that. People, they have Janet Reno has a special list of people, mainly in the state of Idaho and Montana and the Confederacy. You look at the map that they showed that this was in the regular newspaper, that they specially targeted these Christian terrorists, and there was another one. There were terrorists and something else. But anyway, oh, and patriots. No, the ones that are targeted are the patriots, the people that enjoy liberty and freedom and are willing to fight for it. But we have a saner person in Dr. Alpan, and he studied and researched this other way. And he also has a video. I don't know whether they decided to play that now. We're going to play that tonight. But Jack, I'd like you to come up and get started. So I'm not going to give this talk, you know. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's really nice to be here amongst people who are courageous. That's the way I think of you. Men and women who have the courage of their convictions and to do what you think is right in spite of the fact that you have a hostile government that wants to shut down the alternative health movement. A little bit of backup here on this curricula vitae. Most of what Ed was saying is correct. I didn't actually go to Vietnam. I was stationed at Camp Pendleton, and I served there as a naval dentist. And before I went there, though, when I was still in dental school, they wanted to, well, before I got into dental school, they wanted to take me into the military forces. And they said, well, we won't take you in if you agree to go into the service when you're through with your education. And then I agreed to that. And in my senior year at USC, they said, if you go to Annapolis University, at the Military Naval Academy, we will give you your duty station of choice. So I could then pick where I would like to go to serve my 2-year tour of duty in the U.S. Navy as a dentist. And so I went to Annapolis and I learned how to salute and march and wear a gun and polish all my brass and be a good naval officer. And I went in as a lieutenant. Well, they didn't give me my duty station of choice. The government lied to me. Instead, they attached me to the Marine Corps and gave me orders to go to Vietnam. That isn't where I wanted to go. Well, my father was very ill at the time, and I'm the only surviving heir of the Holocaust in Europe. All the rest of my family were killed in the concentration camps. So he wrote letters to all the people he needed to high up in government and said, you can't take my son. And so they didn't. So then the government lied again because I didn't go where they wanted me to go, and they actually backed down and let me stay at Camp Pendleton for 2 years. Instead of letting me do my rotation every 3 months, going through perio, endo, crown and bridge, ortho, whatever, the various specialties in dentistry, they stuck me in a room and they let me drill and fill on teeth for the whole 2 years that I was there. So they lied again. And that's interesting that I wanted you to know about that, because my wife just gave me this front page from Walls in Your Minds, which we have at our table over there in the other room. This is written by Red Beckman. And he said in his little pamphlet, a nation of intelligent people will not trust government with their rights, wealth, and future. They will secure their inalienable rights by maintaining an efficient, honest, and powerless servant government. A nation of people who believe politicians' lies will be forced to pay for an inefficient, corrupt, and authoritarian government that will confiscate rights, wealth, mortgage the future. Well, I don't think anybody in this room would argue with the fact that the government lies. Would you all go along with that? Anybody here disagree with that? Well, the other thing that Ed said was that, we should go out in the streets and fight and do, march and protest and things like that. Well, I don't want you to do that, and no one that I'm connected with wants you to do that at all. We are not about fighting. We're not against the government. We don't want to protest, write letters to, march on, or in any way try to change the existing governmental condition. So what do we want to do then? Well, the main problem in dealing with this subject that I'm about to launch into is that I like to think of it as though I'm going to start talking to you about a 1,000-piece puzzle. And I know what the picture looks like, but none of you in the room know what I'm talking about. And so, as I mention some of these pieces of the puzzle, you may get to thinking, I don't understand what he's talking about. Or there may be some emotions that may come up into your space. You might even get angry. You might feel feelings of fear. You might want to come up here and beat me to death. All kinds of things can happen because I know what I'm talking about. I know what the whole picture looks like because I've been studying it since 1968 when I took courses from Andrew Galambos in the Free Enterprise Institute. So I have been reading hundreds of books and attending many, many classes, in addition to taking all the postgrad courses that I've taken over the years in order to be on an equal footing with all of you in the room. I don't know if any of you read my columns in Let's Live magazine that I wrote for 10 years on preventive dentistry back in 1970s when very few people were doing this holistic stuff. And I've been on Viewpoint on Nutrition with Arnold Pike. So I've kind of put my neck on the line a long time now because I have always felt that my life isn't worth anything if I don't truly fulfill what I think is the right thing for me and all the people around me. And one of the things that he left out of the curricula vitae, which by the way is found in total in a piece that I wrote called An Introduction to Sovereign State Citizenship with Township Membership. And everybody should have an order form, and hopefully you will, if you don't get one of these introductions here, you can order it from me and I'll ship it out to you. So it's very difficult really to know where to begin with this. I've been toying with this now for 2 years since I decided to launch myself into becoming a sovereign state citizen. So how do you know where to begin? Well, I think what we'll do is we'll follow this outline that I made up, I created for you. And everybody should have this front page here. Restore your unalienable human birthrights to be a biological dentist so the ADA and AMA can't use the FDA and many other government agencies to control you as a person, as one of the persons in the alternative health movement. Now the word person is capitalized there because that word has a very unique legal meaning. Now, one of the things that I've learned since has everybody got these forms? Okay, at the head of each table, all of these papers are there. So if you want to take a minute to hand those out to everybody. There's sandwich in between each yellow paper, there's two stacks. And everyone should have 2 stapled documents. We can turn off the tape for a minute and let everyone get this paperwork sorted out. One starts out with the outline, and the other one says 14th Amendment, Amendment 14. There's no way that I can, oh, I better. You should have the outline, Amendment 14, 13 and 14. You should have this overlay of the United States Incorporated map.
13 and 14?
It says 13 and 14 right on the top. There's two amendments.
Was it 13 and 14 stapled together?
Yeah, it's right there, right on the first page. It says 13 and 14. There are more copies up here of things if you don't have them. The map is separate. You should also have one of these, the Peter Pan Law of Jurisdiction. This map here, this little illustration. You should have a product order form so that if there was anything you want to get later, you can order it. Need a map, okay. Yeah, there's, Jenny has some there. When I was asked to give this, Ed didn't tell me how many people were going to show up exactly, so I hope I have enough for everyone. Okay, so now we have all of this paperwork. It would have been nice to have had a table up here so I can spread all my stuff out. Okay, everyone settled now? All the dust is settled down? We've got all the papers. All right. So the question that we want to all find the answer to is, would you like to learn how to remove yourself from the control of the FDA, your local Board of Dental Examiners, and any other federal government agency that thinks that they have jurisdiction over your body, life, soul, and property? Well, let's take a look at history. If you go back all the way to Plato, his philosophy was that his idea or paradigm or model of how a structure of a society should be is that you have the elite on top, and the elite comes from the enlightened ones, those few that are smart enough to know how to run everyone else's lives. And then underneath that, the elite have a military to enforce what they think is good for you on the masses. So this idea is a very old idea. There's a saying, there's nothing new under the sun. Well, we just keep rediscovering old stuff. Well, what is this paradigm? How did it apply during the time of the colonies? And as I give you these bits of data, what I'd like you to do is kind of like think of them as pieces of the puzzle, and you're just going to start recognizing different pieces. I don't know if we'll be able to put the whole puzzle for you together today in an hour and a half, because I have a problem of compressing 26 years of study into an hour and 30 minutes. But I'll do my best. So, the colonists came here from Great Britain because they were being abused by the power of the king. They were serfs on the Lord's turf. And they wanted their own land, and they wanted to worship as they saw fit. They wanted to have religious freedom. Well, how many people here have heard of the founding fathers of the United States of America? Raise your hand. You're all pretty proud of these founding fathers? They're pretty good guys, right? Well, have any of you taken the time, probably not, to study the papers that were written and the letters that were written between these founding fathers, Washington, Jefferson, Adams? No? Well, I have. That's one of the reasons I saw my practice. I figured if I'm going to be wanting to study a whole new subject, it's going to take some time. And I had devoted my whole life to dentistry. And I decided I was going to spend the last part of my life to educate people on how they can regain their humanness, their right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Well, those founding fathers that we have been taught in school, who are our heroes, I refer to as our confounding fathers. Now please don't react emotionally. Calm down, relax. I'll explain why I call them the confounding fathers. Because until a certain event occurred in January of 1776, every one of these so-called founding fathers really wanted one thing, and that was to make peace with King George. And all of these founding fathers were fairly wealthy people. They had land and property, and they were well educated. And they were also some of the members of the Freemasonry organization. Well, if you read the letters that they were writing back and forth to one another, and that was a very popular form of communication in those days, because they didn't have the telephone, didn't have radios, TV, and all the forms of communication we have now. So there was a lot of letter writing and expressing views to one another. All of these founding fathers wanted to redress their grievances with the king and work things out so that they could be a happy British colony under British rule. Well, what happened in January of 1776? Who knows their history? Who knows the hidden part of the history that you were not told about in your public education? Well, is it that you don't know, or you're embarrassed you might make a mistake? No. It's not the Boston Tea Party. Any other ideas? Don't be afraid, because this is a learning process. I'd like you to learn something here. Taxes, that was one of the issues.
Oh, it was housing the soldiers.
Soldiers and armies and fighting and bullets and killing, that was part of the problem.
King George, coining their own money.
Coining their own money was also a contributing factor, but in January something very unique happened. Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense. Now, how many people here have read this book, this little pamphlet? One? One person. Thomas Paine is your godfather. Okay? Up until Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense, the belief on planet Earth was that the king had divine rights. Right? Isn't that what you remember from high school? The divine rights of kings. That means the king could go into the village, pick up a broad, take her up to the castle, rape her, bring her back down, and say, "Thank you very much. That was fun." Or anything else the king wanted to do. He wanted to take you to his dungeon and have a little fun, whatever. You had no rights at all in those days. The king was owner of everything. And he had the divine right from God to do with you, the serf, anything he wanted to do. So that's why the serfs ran away. Well, Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense. And what did he say in there? He said, all men are created equal. That there is no such thing as any divine right. Kings are no different than anybody else. They have no more rights than anybody, than the farmer or the cabinet maker or the shoemaker. All men are created equal and independent. And he said, we cannot make any kind of arrangement with this king because he does not have our interests at heart. We have to break away. All of the founding fathers wanted to stay as part of England. He said, no, we must separate. He then wrote the original Declaration of Independence, which was then signed by various people, and Thomas Jefferson was given the credit for it. But it's important to know who really did what, if you want to get to the truth of any philosophical basis. And it was actually Thomas Paine who wrote the Declaration of Independence. And I have a book here written by Joseph Lewis in 1947, wherein he proves beyond any shadow of a doubt why it would have to be Thomas Paine and it could never have been Thomas Jefferson who wrote the Declaration of Independence. And in order to make yourself sovereign, you're going to have to break up the models or the paradigms in which you have all been brought up and raised to believe as being true. Because what you believe is true is what keeps you locked into a certain framework of thinking. And that framework of thinking has been developed now ever since the Illuminati was formed in May of 1776, right after Thomas Paine wrote his book. Now, when Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense, the people who read it were the farmers, those who were the subjects of King of Britain. They got so infuriated and so, how should I say, inspired by his writings, and I know that everyone here who will read it, hopefully, will also become inspired. And he sold more books in that period of time than any other book that had ever been sold in that time span and that time on the history of any written form. And then it was printed again and again. They just bought it up and really loved it. And of course the founding fathers saw the enthusiasm of the colonists and they said, well, I guess we better go along with these people or they're going to lynch us. So they took an opportunity presented to them by Thomas Paine to rally the people in the idea again towards separating themselves from this king. And so we have what is called the American Revolution. One of the things I learned from Galambos, founder of the Free Enterprise Institute, the revolution didn't really have anything to do with guns and bullets. A revolution happens up here. It's the same thing that happened to everyone in this room when you were trained in a certain way in your establishment school to drill, fill, and bill, or to write a prescription for some kind of a drug or surgery or radiation if you're a medical doctor. You went through some kind of a neurolinguistic programming for a period of years in order to create a certain model for you, a product. People were planning this for the last 200 years, since Illuminati was formed by Adams Weishaupt. His writings on how to take control of the government were then duplicated by Karl Marx in 1848, and the Communist Manifesto is now in full force and effect in the United States of America. And I have a piece at home that goes like this: Are you a practicing communist? And if you don't think you are, you read this paper and you find out you are. That's how amazingly brilliant the people who want to control you have controlled you by the use of brainwashing, or neuro-linguistic programming as it's called now. Well, so before Paine we had the power in the elite. Everyone was a serf. Paine came along and said no. He raised all the serfs to the level of the king and said all human beings are created equal and independent, and that they have the same right as the king. And then we went to battle. And that's really what we went to battle over, was this idea that the king really is not what everybody up to that point thought he was. And then after the war, 1783, a treaty of peace was signed. It's also in this Introduction to Sovereignty. These are various documents for you to read and study, so that you will see that what we are talking about can be proven in law, and that it's very well documented, and that we're not just giving you my opinion or anybody else's opinion, but is actually factually backed up. So the Treaty of Peace was signed in 1783, and the king in that treaty acknowledged all Americans as equal sovereigns, just as he was. So for the first time on Earth, and the only place on the planet, the United States of America, whose name was given to this country by Thomas Paine, the people were sovereign over its government. The people were the kings. And all the kings, and ladies and men were included in this, according to Paine, but then the confounding fathers changed that. If you read Paine's writings, you'll find out that he wanted equal rights for men, women, and children back in 1776, and for blacks and reds and whites and yellows and whatever other color of human beings there are on the planet. Whereas Thomas Jefferson was a slaveholder, and he had a different viewpoint of the black race, the black people. I don't like to think of in terms of different races, because all the human beings on the planet belong to one race of human beings, just different colors. Okay? That's another way of these elitists trying to manipulate your minds and separating you by saying there's a black race and a brown race and a yellow race. There's only one race of human beings on this planet. The rest, other races, are not human beings. They're animals or plants or things like that. Well, so since that document was written, we then created a new form of government wherein the people were sovereign, and we developed what is called a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. All right. Well, I don't think most people really understand what really that means. A government of the people means that the people are the government. By the people, that the people govern themselves, and for the people, that the laws that the people make are for their own benefit. Now, when was the last law that you heard passed that was for your benefit? A long time ago. See, if you look at the laws of nature, every living creature lives for its own self-interest first. Self-survival is the primary force for everything that lives on the planet. This is the law of nature. And I learned from Galambos first that you must obey all the laws of nature. And then that was confirmed for me when I watched the Parquet commercials on television, and it said, you can't fool Mother Nature. I figured, well, the TV said it must be true. Well, you've all heard of the rise and fall of various civilizations, right? You've read about this in your history classes. Well, why do the civilizations rise and then fall? It's got to be a reason. The only reason is that that's culture, that's the social structure that was developed with faulty premises, with concepts that were incorrect, that violated the laws of nature. Now, if you want to build a bridge using pi as 3.0 because the mathematics will be easier, you can build your bridge with pi being 3.0 instead of the transcendental number that it is. But guess what will happen to your bridge? It will collapse. The same thing applies to the social structure. Now, since all human beings and all living things survive for themselves first, once they're comfortable, then they can start thinking about taking care of other people. Then how is it that you suppose that anybody came to an idea that if they delegated their own responsibility for their own self-government to another human being to represent their interest, that such an idea would possibly work? Violates the first law of nature. All living things pursue their own self-interest first. So why then should it be contrary to see that all politicians serve their own best interest first? It has to be that way. So you see, the representative form of government can't possibly work. And we're seeing the evidence of the destruction of this social structure right before our eyes. Because it's based on false premise. Another thing I learned from Nathaniel Branden, who was a student of Ayn Rand, a Russian author who wrote Atlas Shrugged, The Fountainhead, and great books like this. How many people have read her works? Well, she was a Russian. She came from Russia, so she knew what communism was like and the collective mentality. And instead of everybody going through high school reading Fountainhead, they read all the books that were printed by those who own the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States, it's not as a private bank. I'm sure you all know that by now. The people that control our public education and write these books program our children and all of us in this room to believe the way we believe. And so we have swallowed a big hook. Well, what happened to Paine's dream? This idea, that notion that all human beings are sovereign and that we all should control our own destiny and our own lives and our own government. Well, certain things happened over a period of time, and those are expressed in your outline as under recreation of the Great British Paradigm. The Great British Paradigm is based on the Plato paradigm, which is the elite on top, the military ruling the masses. Okay, this is now being expressed in what is called the New World Order. How many people thought the New World Order was good? Raise your hand. I mean, that was, let's not say good and bad, because that's a dangerous word to get into. How many people thought the New World Order was in your best interest? Anybody? No? Okay, good. I need to know what kind of an audience I have. So that will help me direct this creating this puzzle for you and this picture that I want you to see by the time we're done. Well, Paine actually had some very brilliant ideas on how to create a social system that wouldn't fail. But the confounding fathers really wanted to still maintain their control over the people. And so they devised all kinds of little deceptions and little loopholes in the various documents that we have all come to love and cherish and think is so great for us. For instance, the U.S. Constitution, which was ratified in 1789, became the law of the land. Well, the U.S. Constitution, like any constitution, like originally the first state constitutions were written, you have been taught in your education that the Constitution was written to protect your rights, right? Isn't that what you were taught? That's not true. The Constitution was not written to protect your rights. You have, as a human being, birthrights that God gave you from the day you were born. The Constitution was written by sovereign human beings. That means they had the same power as the king, to restrict the government. That's all it was written for. This little document here is the original 1849 State California Republic Constitution. Look how small it is. It is the people's expression and starts out, "We the people of California, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom in order to secure its blessings, do establish this Constitution." And what does it say in Article 1, Declaration of Rights, Section 1? All men are by nature free and independent, and have certain inalienable rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring and possessing and protecting property, and pursuing and obtaining safety and happiness. And in Section 2 it says, this is very important now, this is where all your power comes from, all political power is inherent in the people. Well, how many of you people feel very powerful today in relation to your government? Anybody? Raise your hands. No? Well, during the course of the presentations today, I sat down and I took all kinds of interesting notes from the speakers. And one of them said, well, I'm not going to talk to you about this over the phone. Remember that one? Can you imagine that a free, sovereign, kingly person is afraid to talk to another kingly person about a subject on the phone because some government agent might come in and through some spying techniques, maybe listening to your conversation and arrest you and put you in jail or close your practice down because of something that you said as a king, one king to another, or queen to another queen? So you see, there is an admission here. The people, you people, are in admission that you are being watched and that you better be careful. And God forbid you say the wrong thing to this person or that person, otherwise the government's going to come down on you and take away your license. Remember the rights that Thomas Paine talked about that we had? It's expressed again in this Constitution. He said, government is instituted for the protection, security, and benefit of the people. Well, if you can't talk to somebody on the phone without fear of the government coming and attacking you, is that for your security and benefit and protection? I don't think so. Doesn't sound like it to me. And they have the right to alter or reform the same whenever the public good may require. Well, the people that I'm connected with, Richard McDonald, who started this whole political movement to restore states' rights and citizens' rights, does not want to alter anything. We don't want to alter the government. We don't want to attack it. We don't want to march on it, fight it, or do anything with it, because it will destroy itself. What we want to do is build a parallel structure right alongside of it by educating people like yourselves, and so that when this other structure collapses, you'll be there ready to take back what was yours all along, which is your own right as a sovereign. What is a sovereign? Well, a sovereign is a master who has control over everything in his environment. In this book, The Introduction to Sovereignty, there's a whole list of definitions in there. Sovereign is one of them. Also, in the handout that I gave you, there's a whole list of words, keywords, that are defined for you, like person and a privilege or a license. Those words are important because these are the words that have been used to entrap you into this form of control. All right, now, what happened to this dream of you being a king in control of the government instead of the government being in control of you? How did this happen? What events took place over a period of time that converted you from, this was the original order, God, we the people, created the state government, wrote a constitution to restrict the public servants, and then we allowed these public servants to represent us, we the people, to create another government, the federal government, and we were still right there under God, we the people. We were in command. What happened to that chain of command? Right now it's just the other way around, isn't it? You have God, you have the corporate government, right? You have the military, and you, the people, are underneath it all, on the bottom. Well, how did that happen? What series of events occurred to make this happen? Well, in 1868 was the first major change. The 14th Amendment was passed. How many people remember that one? That was right after the Civil War. What was that for? Well, we were told then, and we're still told in our history classes now, that it was to give citizenship to the black slave, because the slave on the plantation was not a citizen. He was property, bought and sold like furniture. So the government said they were creating the 14th Amendment to give this furniture a status of a citizen. Very nice. It's a nice gesture. The only problem is, they didn't tell you, and I didn't find out until 1992 from Richard McDonald, that this word person in the 14th Amendment, all persons born or naturalized in the United States are subject to the jurisdiction thereof. This word person, if you go to Black's Law Dictionary, is defined as a corporation. Interesting. So, what looked like a nice gesture of giving these slaves citizenship wasn't really citizenship, because a corporation cannot confer citizenship on anyone. Only a state, a sovereign state, can do that. Okay? The only thing a corporation can do is confer a franchise. If you want to buy a McDonald's franchise, you go to the mother corporation, say, I would like to own a McDonald's franchise. They'll sell it to you, and there's 30 pages of contract, and all in fine print about what you can and can't do if you want to operate this franchise. Okay. So in 1868, these persons now become subjects. Instead of being subjects under their slave master on the plantation, the private plantation, they are now subjects under the corporate plantation, the U.S. Federal Government Corporation. See, there are three definitions of the United States. That's why when people look at this first thing on my shirt, says not a U.S. citizen, very few people have ever come up to me and said, what do you mean you're not a U.S. citizen, and why are you so proud of that? In fact, I've waited for people to come up and, pop me one. but no one has. But I've gotten some dirty looks. Well, I'm not a U.S. citizen because there are 3 definitions of the U.S. citizen. And in your handout is it is written down what those definitions are. So I'd like to take a minute to find that definition of the U.S. of the 3 United States. Has anybody found it yet?
On page 12, it says United States has 3 meanings.
Yes, there you go.
Page 12.
This is the first time I've actually presented this speech this way with these notes, so I just prepared it just before I got here, so I appreciate your help. On page 12, Hooven versus Allison. That's a court case. United States has 3 meanings. The term United States may be used in any one of the several cases. It may be merely the name of a sovereign occupying the position analogous to other sovereigns in a family of nations. That's the United States 1. That's the United States government that represents us in dealing with other foreign nations. Okay, and I'm still a member of that. I'm a part of that U.S. citizenship when I leave the United States. I have a passport, and I'm a citizen of that United States. Okay? The next definition is, it may designate the territory over which the sovereignty of the United States extends. What territory are they talking about? Guam, Samoa, Virgin Islands, the District of Columbia are territories that they have sovereignty over. They have control over those territories, D.C. And the third one is, or it may be the collective name of the states which are united by and under the Constitution. These are the 50 United States of America as we know them and think of them as separate independent states. That's why I'm a sovereign state citizen of the state of California. Okay? I'm not a citizen of US 2. That's the one that controls you through the FDA, your local boards of examiners, the Board of Medical Quality Assurance. All of these agencies control you through US 2. Well, where in our U.S. Constitution is US 2 described? Well, it's described in Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. And Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Clause 17 from the U.S. Constitution describes this United States 2 I want to read it to you so you don't just think I'm making something up. So I'm trying to find it so I can read the exact words. Section 8 starts, the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, and so on and so forth, and to, on clause 17, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square as may by cession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress become the seat of the government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. That's U.S. too. That's what I am no longer in contract with. That government is the one that is controlling your lives. What is the other thing that happened in the series of events in history? Well, the 14th Amendment changed the person to a subject again. In 1935, the Social Security Act gave a number and changed the human being to becoming a person, admitting incompetence and making yourself a ward of the U.S. federal government corporation. When you accepted the Social Security number, you said to the government, I cannot take care of myself. I am not a sovereign human being. I'm not a king. I really can't take care of myself. I want you to take care of me from cradle to grave. I want you to supply me with workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, disability, and I want all of these things, these benefits, because I can't arrange my life and plan it out myself. I need government to help me. I give up in exchange for those benefits, being a human being, and agree to becoming a franchise of this corporation, and I will thereby, from here on in, follow all the rules and regulations that you will create for my best interest. Then came the Public Salary Tax Act of 1939, where they defined the tax on public employees, federal employees, and then a year later they created the Buck Act of 1940. Now, I don't have time to go into reading all this stuff for you. That's why I printed it up. It's there. You can take this stuff home and read about it on your own and see what I'm talking about, that it's all true. But the Buck Act of 1940, what it did, it created an overlay of the federal state over the sovereign state. Now, you look at that map that I gave you, and you see the United States. There's two United States, one on top of the other. The one on the bottom is the one that is common law, the law of the land. That is where the sovereign lives, on that bottom United States. The top is the fiction that has been created by government through these various acts that have been passed over a period of time. Remember, the people that want to control the planet, the elite, are very patient, and they maintain their families from generation to generation, creating dynasties. So they pass on this power through the family for generations on time. And so this master plan of the elite controlling the planet is carried out by these various acts. The Buck Act was the final thing, and that Buck Act was actually found in Title IV, the U.S. codes, under flags and seals. It was very cleverly hidden away under flags and seals, and was only discovered last year by Bunny Speakman, who was doing research, legal research. And that was the key that finally gave them ultimate power over your lives. The Buck Act created a state within a state. It extended the federal jurisdiction, which is originally limited in Washington, D.C. and the territories that were described in the original Constitution, to go into every single state, creating all these federal and state agencies that would now be part of this superstructure that would have total control on everything that you could possibly imagine doing. Well, in 1987, 1981 actually, Richard McDonald, this is item 2 on your outline. Richard McDonald in 1981 started doing some legal research about what happened, trying to trace the sequence of events of how the government of the people, by the people, and for the people became a government of the government, by the government, and for the government. And after doing legal research for 5 years, that's all he did full time. He was a police officer before that in the Los Angeles Police Department as a detective. So we had this kind of detective personality. He liked to go and find out things, okay? So all he did, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, is he buried himself in the law library and he just read and studied and researched. And then in 1987, he came out and started this political movement to restore states' rights and citizens' rights. And in 1992, I declared my state citizenship on August 13th. And in 1993, I wrote a letter to the Board of Dental Examiners, which by default, they agree that I don't have a license, but I have in fact a certificate of competency. And that if you look up the word license in the dictionary, in the law dictionary, it is a permission to do something. And of course, as a sovereign human being, king, in control and ruler over his public servant, I would never need permission from my servant to do anything, would I? But if you're not a sovereign human being, but you are in contract with this corporation, who this corporation grants certain privileges to its subjects, they could take away those privileges from you. For instance, how many people here have a driver's license in their wallet? And how many people know that this is a privilege given to you? Isn't that true? You know that this is a privilege granted to you. Well, see, I don't have that privilege. I have the right to travel. I don't need some public servant to give me permission to travel. Then I wouldn't have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, would I? But when you are a person in contract with the corporation and sign this 30-page contract, which you never knew existed even, then you don't have the right to travel. You only have a permission granted to you. Only if you're a good boy and good girl and pay all the fees and fines and all the things that they're going to impose on you. And if you get your date stamp and you look at it, the upper right-hand corner has got a date on it. And when that thing expires, you got to send in more money in order to have the privilege to drive. Well, I'd like you all, when you get home, to look at your license plate and look at that little date stamp with a light carefully. And you'll see that it says official use, for official use. Interesting. So your car really isn't yours. The car belongs to the government. And they're giving you permission to use their property. So you never got the ownership slip. You only got a pink slip. The ownership slip was destroyed. You don't own your car. You don't own your home. You don't own anything. In fact, as a person, franchise of this corporation, you have no right to ownership. I mean, you have a right to ownership and possession, but you don't have the absolute right to the property. Only a sovereign state citizen has that right. So when I wrote to the Board of Dental Examiners and said you have 30 days in which to reply, that my license is in fact not a permission to practice my dentistry, but in fact is a certificate of competence, you think they replied? No, they didn't. And what does that mean in law? By default, I won. I am now practicing with a certificate of competency and not a license or a permission. The same thing with my driver's license. Since I have the right to travel, why do I need their permission to do something that I have by right? So I sent my driver's license in. And I travel by right rather than by permission. On your other handout that you have, Peter Pan Law Jurisdiction. You can see one is on the right, when you're looking down on the paper, the figure on your left-hand side, is the sovereign sentient human being. That's the real flesh and blood you. Okay, and on the other side, on the extreme left, is the sun, which is casting a shadow from you on the right side, which is a wall, and on that wall is your shadow, which is a figment of you. It is not you, okay? It is your shadow. Well, on that wall, you can see all those things that this fiction has been created to represent the real you. It isn't you at all. Everything on that wall that you see there is part of a fiction. Fiction at law. And you can see there it says what that entails. The franchised into a District of Columbia, State of New Columbia, and the State of the United States. Notice they're all in capital letters, because when anybody here ever receive a letter from a government agency, did you ever notice that all of the letters on the address are in capital letters? Your name is in capital letters, your address is in capital letters. There's nothing but capital letters there. Also, there's a zip code on there. These numerous commercial contracts to be performed in federal venue or in jurisdiction, zone, arguably supplanting your inalienable rights. So you've given up your God-given rights in exchange for privileges. The civil rights are created by the government, by this corporation. You have no access to the law of the land, the statutes, or judicial decisions. You can only use the procedural due process. Those are the due process that they give you. For instance, it wasn't until 1966, 68, that you had the due process of trial by jury. That's when this government said, yeah, we better give these people trial by jury rights. See, as a sovereign state citizen, we had that from the date of our birth. We don't need a government to give us that right. We have limited liability as provided by law on this right side, and you become a statutory person created by Congress and the state legislature. So that's why when the Board of Dental Examiners sent a subpoena to Ed and said, produce your records, Ed, as this fiction here, this subject of this corporation, has to comply. Or, if they want to get real tough with Ed, they'll take his license away, if that's what they want to do. Because his license was only granted to him by their permission. And if he violates any of their rules and they don't like him, they just take it away. And it doesn't matter who you hire for a lawyer, because the lawyer's interest is not yours. His first duty is to the court. And if you read the papers that I gave you, you will find the definition of an attorney and how if you hire an attorney, you become a ward of the court. You admit that in law. What is a ward of the court or a ward of the government? The definition is in here. When you assign yourself the title of ward of a court, You're saying to them, you're incompetent, you're not a sovereign human being, and I'm going to let someone else take care of me because I can't take care of myself. So, of course, as a sovereign, we would never, ever think of hiring an attorney. On the contrary, all the years that we were going through elementary school and high school, we should have been learning how to use the law. The law is for us, not for them. They say the law is too difficult to learn. Well, I'm a dentist. I spent my whole life and career, 30 years, in learning about nutrition and dentistry and all these things that you people have learned as well. I went through high school and college, grade school, here in the United States, because I got here when I was 8 months old from Slovakia. And so I got a full-blown American brainwashing, just like everyone else. Only what they want you to think is that you're not good enough to take care of yourself, and that you need the government to take care of you. And that's how they make you the ward. When you get that Social Security number, you become a ward, not a sovereign. There is also a word in here called sui juris, if you notice anywhere on here. Also in the introduction to sovereignty, and on my card. See, I'm a service center. That is, I work with Richard McDonald, and I teach what he learned over the years since 1981, 13 years of research. I teach the principles that I've learned from him to other people as a service center. And my name is Jack Alpan, DDS, sui juris. Definition is in here. Means that I am not a ward of the court. I can take care of myself. I am my own man, and I'm a king in my own home. And when I become a sovereign state citizen, I can put my home into allodium, which is an absolute ownership of property, and never have to pay property tax again. Because the property tax is what? It is your fee to live on their soil. Because you don't own the land. You can't as a person, as a corporation. You can't own the land. You can only be granted possession and ownership, but you don't have the right to it. So you've given up that right as well. Well, how does this apply to you as a biological dentist? Point 3. Jonathan Wright, MD from Tacoma, Washington, had a run-in with the FDA. The FDA is just an arm of the ADA and the AMA in order to control the subjects. And one of the handouts that I gave you is a copy of the case. You can thumb through there and see if you can find it, on Jonathan Wright. Poor Jonathan Wright. When they first attacked him, and I read about his attacks in the National Health Federation, since I've been lecturing at NHF meetings for the last 20 years, I called up Jonathan. I said, Jonathan, if you become a sovereign state citizen, this was last year, then the federal government will not be able to bully you out of practice. He didn't listen to me. So the courts, did you find it yet? Okay. Notice the first line of the court's decision there. Does everyone have it? The first line of the court's decision says, the court has jurisdiction over this person, right? Is that what it says? and to the subject matter, right? The court has jurisdiction over this person. Jonathan Wright was and still is a person. He's still this corporate entity. He's not a human being. He's this piece of property with a number attached to it. No different than the numbers that Hitler marked on his concentration camp victims. If you haven't seen Schindler's List yet, you should see the movie Schindler's List. Because you people are no different than those guys that have the mark stamped on their body, on their flesh. That number is the same number. Only you voluntarily carry it around in your wallet like a badge of honor. And in fact, it's your badge of slavery. So, since Jonathan Wright still is the person, then he gets what persons get from their sovereign rulers, like King George, who grant privileges and then take them away. Mark Hewlett, also a colleague of mine, a dentist in Apple Valley, a really nice man, lovely man. We shared booths at the National Health Federations for years, trying to educate the public about mercury poisoning. I stopped doing it back in 1979 when I took Peter Medill's course in San Francisco on EAV, and I stopped using it, and I came back, and within a week or so I had booked an appearance on KTT Channel 11 News, and I got on the news and I broadcast on the news to the nation, mercury is a toxic substance. I had a 3-minute spot. I thought the next day I'd be flooded with people rushing in to have their mercury fillings removed. Not one single call. Well, you know, it's hard to buck all that brainwashing that people have gotten for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. But I don't give up. I just keep shouting and yelling until I'm heard. And poor Mark Hewlett, he lost his license too, because he's a person. He's not a sovereign state citizen. And he went bankrupt, he lost everything he had. Since I knew him personally, we were friends, that really hurt me a lot. And it still does, very painful to see what happened to this person, because it could have been avoided. Well, do we want to fight it? Do we want to fight this thing? Is that the solution? Do we want to write letters to our congressman? Do we want to march and protest like Linda, what's her name, Thompson? No, we don't want to do those things. All we want to do is educate ourselves. All education is what? Self-education. You all went to dental school or medical school in this room, and you got an education. What did you get? You got fed into your minds that which somebody else wanted you to know. And then what happened when you got out of school? You got inquisitive, and you started asking questions, and you started to find out that what you were taught in school was not all the truth. And so what did you do? You educated yourselves. Everyone in this room took courses, bought books, read them, looked up words in the dictionary, and you studied. You became a student. And by so doing, you became better practitioners in your fields and were better able to help your patients and provide a better health service. So we don't want to fight the government. We want to educate ourselves back into being what? Sovereign human beings. Real, live, flesh and blood human beings, not pieces of property with a number on us. Now, if I can do it, anybody can do it in this room. Anybody can read the material that I gave you, take it home, in the quiet of your home, read everything I've given you. If you read everything that I have given you, you will have a headache and a heartache worse than you ever had when you found out about mercury poisoning. When you realize what has been done to you, you may even cry. I know I did. So we don't want to fight it. Yes?
Have you witnessed any people going through this process that have presented themselves as sovereign citizens to the establishment?
I'm one of the witnesses.
No, I understand that, but
There's about 250,000 witnesses.
under duress,
I don't understand.
under attack by the establishment.
Well, if you follow this course of action and you remove yourself from that jurisdiction, there is no further attack. They cannot step on you. You're not within their jurisdiction. You have to realize one thing about these people, these elitists. They obey the law, okay? They are not criminals. A lot of you people think that they're violating your rights when they come in and take your license away, or they come in and break down Jonathan Wright's doors and strip search his nurses. And it sounds like, oh, they're taking away my rights. Well, you never had any rights to take away because you gave them up. They don't do those kinds of things to sovereign human beings. Now, if they do, like for instance, the way we test these things, for instance, we travel without a license plate on our car, and a policeman stops us and says, how come you don't have a license plate on your car? Well, I turned it back in to the DMV, and I asked them to give me some other form of identification since I'm a sovereign, and I don't need this. I bought the car, I have a bill of sale, it's mine, I own it in absolute ownership. I have no pink slip, I turned everything back in. So I don't need a license. Where's your driver's license? Well, I don't have one. What happened? I turned that back in too. And I wrote a letter to the DMV and I said, please give me some other form of identification so that when your officer will stop me, he will know that I am in fact a sovereign state citizen and I don't need a license. Give me some other document that says that I have the right to travel. Well, they never comply with any of those things, so the police officer stops us. And when we tell them the whole story, many of them say, wow, that's fantastic. Where can I find out more about this? And they start attending our classes, and they become sovereign, and they do the same things. Or some guy, maybe had a bad day or a bad night. He writes you out a ticket. So what? You go to court, we present our documents that Richard has been working on now for years. Okay, what happens? Well, they're not going to let us win on the merits of the case, because then it would be published and every lawyer in the country would see it and it would be an instant revolution. I mean, it would be incredible. So what do? Then this happens hundreds of times in Southern California where this all started, and in other states now too. Since we present these papers to the judge and they see that what we're doing is perfectly legal, moral, ethical, and everything, and that we've actually taken ourselves out of the contract with this federal government, the judge orders the policeman to leave the room. And then he says, there's no policeman in the room. Case dismissed. I swear to you, this is what is going on. Now, what does that tell us? That we're right. Now, we know we're right because we have a lot of federal, state, and other judges that are now helping us secretly. They don't want their lives endangered. So we have a lot of people that are helping us. Lawyers, judges, federal and state, are helping us, doing more research, actually feeding Richard with more information. And now we can beat him in court. Okay, so this has been going on since '87. He went public. So it's now 250,000 people later that have actually used this thing, and we win every time. Yes?
About Montana, where they were going after the Freeman movement. I think Beckman's lost all his property and they sold all his business.
Right, because Beckman was a citizen. I mean, not a sovereign state citizen. He still had his Social Security number. He never would listen to Richard McDonald, never would give up his Social Security number. See, there are a lot of people out there that are patriots, and you're going to, after today, you may become more interested in this subject. In fact, as the universe works, the fact that you sat here and listened to me, something very strange is going to happen in your lives now. Now you're going to start getting all kinds of information from all kinds of sources. Say, God, all of a sudden I'm hearing all this stuff. Where is it coming from? Well, it's always been there, but now you've been brought up to a new level of awareness, and now you're going to see things you never saw before. Okay? And people in the universe out there are going to know that you are ready for them. Boom. You're going to be zapped with all kinds of stuff. Yes?
How do you learn how to get rid of your Social Security number? Because I've tried and I couldn't get rid of it.
Right. Ed was telling me at lunch he tried the same thing. Well, a lot of things, that's step number 4. Actually, we walk away from it. And then step 4 is how can one legally remove oneself from the federal jurisdiction? Well, 1, you can discover the fraud. And you know what a fraud is? What is the definition of a fraud? What are the 3 elements of a fraud? Anybody? 1 element. Give me 1 element of fraud. What? Misrepresentation. Good. What's another one? What? Non-disclosure. What's another one? Entrapment. If you have any one of these 3 elements in law, you have a fraud. Now, if you got a Social Security number and the government didn't tell you, oh, you want this number? Fine. But when you do this, you're now trading in your inalienable God-given rights in exchange for these corporate franchise privileges, and you are no longer considered a human being in law, but this artificial entity. Would you have taken that number? Had you been told that? I don't think anybody would have. But see, they didn't disclose it. Item number 1 of the fraud. Ready? You have to close?
Yeah, we're gonna close because of the time.
Okay.
But the really important thing is, we shouldn't be playing intellectual ladder games with the government. We should just tell them we're sovereign citizens, and that should suffice. Because they lied to us from the beginning. It's an incredible story.
Well, like I said, I didn't think I could get this all done in an hour and a half. But I understand we're going to have a gathering tonight at 8 o'clock to show this videotape called Liberty in the Balance. Now, I would be glad to finish what I didn't get to now. We can talk about it some more. I can tell you more about the things that you can do and how you need to go about doing it. Because like everything else in the universe, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. Ask Doug Lieber. He's a great man that has developed a whole technology with the Computron, and he knows that if you use this tool incorrectly, it won't give you the right results. Isn't that true? Okay. So it's like anything else. If you are a doctor, or a dentist, or a chiropractor, or a nurse, or whatever, a nutritionist, if you don't do your craft correctly, you don't help the patient. It's the same thing with state citizenship. This is a process that has been developed now since 1981 through Richard's research, and it is a detailed program that has been developed to safely take you out of this trap. And basically all we want to do is take you off of the sinking ship and transfer you to a non-sinking ship. We don't want to do anything to the sinking ship because there's nothing you can do about it. It is going down. Okay? And so how to do that, that's what service centers are for. That's what I am. There's service centers all over the country. In 23 states, we now have service centers. And it's not a movement to fight against taxes. It's not a movement to try to change the government. We don't want to secede from the government. We don't want to do anything that is negative in any way at all. We merely want to educate you to take back what you gave up. Once you discover the fraud, there is a law in law. Once you have discovered that you are a party to a fraud, you have the legal right to cancel all the contracts. They are null and void from the day you got it. You never had a Social Security number because it is a fraud. Okay? You think you got a Social Security number, and as long as you think so, then you are that person. There's another maxim in law, and that is that silence means you agree. If you are silent and don't tell the government, hey, wait a minute, I know you guys have committed a fraud, I've caught your hands in the cookie jar, and I'm not going to be a part of this fraud anymore, I'm out. I'm canceling every single contract I ever made from you, and nunc pro tunc. From the beginning, it never existed. I have never been a U.S. citizen. I only thought so. It's a fraud. Doesn't count. I've always been a sovereign state citizen, yes.
So you don't pay your taxes?
I'm not required. I'm not a taxpayer. I'm not the individual. I'm not the person. I'm not the legal entity that is required to do that.
So you get away with it?
Well, come back at 8 o'clock and we'll talk more about that. Yes.
So how long does that process take to,
How long does it take to exit from this contract? 3 to 6 months to a year, depending on how much embedded and engrossed you are and tied up with it. So the more complex your estate, the more legal work has to be done to extricate yourself from all of these contracts that you've had. Thank you.
So you got the mic right there. Just a short announcement. How many people think they went to last night to listen to the video? Okay.
You make it 8:15.
8:15?
Want to do that then? Okay. That's
Even 8:30, whenever you guys want to come. I'll be there.
8:15 is okay? Okay. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, we got a good day tomorrow. Enjoy yourself.